Um, Thank you, everyone, for joining this evening. I'd like to begin by saying that I am on Pangarang Yorta Yorta country, and I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the water, land, sky, and dreaming, and I pay my respects to the elders, past and present. So today is the final of the four-stage process, and this is the monitoring and evaluation part of the cycle. So monitoring progress is essential for this work, and it's critical for a number of reasons. Monitoring enables us to know whether or not our work has actually created an age-friendly environment. It enables us to celebrate the successes and acknowledge all of those who've contributed to the work. It helps us to grow and develop our age-friendly work. And equally importantly, it provides that strong evidence base for funding of all kinds, whether that's research or particular initiatives, but also the continuation for some of us of our own positions. So being able to undertake effective monitoring and evaluation allows all of those things to happen. Anne Barrett in her presentation used the image of growth when talking about action plans. And it's the conditions that enable growth that we're measuring and nurturing through our work. And it's what we're trying to capture when we monitor and evaluate, even in the presence of other indicators that might not be looking so successful. So the monitoring and evaluation plan starts with the first step of the cycle. And if you remember when Samuel explained that the importance of establishing your age-friendly work with that committee structure and doing that baseline assessment. And that baseline assessment is also the baseline for your ongoing monitoring and evaluation. And the methods Samuel presented to us about how to collect data for that baseline are the same ones that you'll continue to use for your monitoring and evaluation as well. And then Natalie went through how to establish that major plan of action, those strategic goals and the vision. And it's those visions and goals in that plan that are the things that the progress towards which you're evaluating. And Natalie gave us a program logic, and it's that vision and those priorities and to the goal that is the process of the evaluation plan. So the WHO have published a guide on how to measure the age friendliness of cities on the use of core indicators in that work. And they've also given us another way of presenting a program logic that this time includes the resources and the interventions or the actions, as well as the goals or the priorities, and the vision. And in this program logic, they're described as outcomes and impact. The WHO guide is very much focused on large cities and population level outcomes. And it's this distinction between measuring change at the population level and at the program level that I want to focus a little bit on today. And this understanding of the difference between these comes from results-based accountability, and it gives us a framework for monitoring and evaluation that enables us to separate these two things. And in RBA, population accountability is about measuring our progress towards the well-being of a whole population, whether that's a large apartment complex in a major city, whether it's a whole city itself or a small town, whether it's a province or a state or even a whole country. Whereas when we look at performance accountability, that's about measuring and monitoring and evaluating our progress for the well-being of the people who are directly benefiting or involved in the work we do on a daily basis. So when we think about our age-friendly community work, population accountability is about measuring our progress towards the vision or the outcomes for our geographic community. And to be able to get to that vision, it's going to require much more than any individual age-friendly program. So for us to develop that place that's a great place to grow old in, we need long-term change across all of those domains of an age-friendly city. But it still remains important in our own monitoring and evaluation to think about how we measure and how we monitor progress towards that vision. And to do that, we need indicators. So with your committee, you can agree on a set of indicators to set progress at that population level. And the WHO guide is a great resource in undertaking that work. And there are also good examples of indicator sets on in the Global Networks database. But locally, you can look at international and national examples, and you can also ask these 6 questions that can help you decide on indicators that are going to matter for your community. And it's really important because indicators are not neutral. So they need to be acceptable to your community, and they need to align with the principles and the value of your work. And so in Natalie's plan, transport was a priority. So this is an Australian example of transport indicators that we've developed. So the vision is described, it's focused on affordable and user-friendly transport. And so there are 3 indicators to measure and monitor progress towards that vision. There's one single indicator that's a very general measure of accessibility, and then 2 that are specific to those key terms of accessible and affordable transport. So when you look at data for how to measure your indicator, going back to your baseline data, you may well have already identified data for that in your baseline data set. And you might also have access to publicly available data from your government, either provincial, state, or national governments. And there's often very good NGO government that can assist there. And if you're fortunate, you might also have access to geocoded data that can be much more tailored to your communities. The third step in the cycle, as Anne Barrett explained, was to make that action plan. And this is the part of the cycle that we're looking at to monitor our performance and our actions. So performance accountability, the second part of that RBA framework, gives us 3 key questions to guide the monitoring, the regular monitoring of our work. So how much or what are we doing? How well are we doing it? And is anyone better off? So to answer those questions, we need to be really clear about who are we working with and who benefits from our work. And the presenters of the case studies that we've heard about over these last 4 weeks have spoken really clearly about how much work they do within their organisations and the work that it takes to secure political commitment. So they form part of the people that are included in your monitoring of your performance, as well as the people who are directly taking part in your initiatives and are the benefits of those initiatives. So if we come back to WHO's program logic for monitoring and evaluating age-friendly communities, monitoring performance focuses on those inputs or resources and the outputs or the interventions part of your program logic. So we can measure and track and monitor our performance in quite simple ways. And there are a number of common measures that we've listed here, and these slides are going to be available to you, so you'll be able to look at these in greater detail. And equity is included in our monitoring and evaluation. And again, the WHO Guide has some very good advice on how to measure equity. Now, this is an example from my own work. So the initials ATSI stand for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, because it's a very important group that we need to consider in our work. So it's also reasonably straightforward to actually monitor your progress against your performance using quite a simple document that can record regularly what you've done, who you've met with, how many meetings you've had, what sort of recruitment you've done, what are the events that you've run, and what's happened, how many of those things have you done. So keeping a watch on these on a regular basis, just using a simple tool, can be really helpful and effective as well. The last question in performance accountability is anyone better off is the really crucial one, and it's the hardest, and it's the one that doesn't get done universally as effectively as we could perhaps do, and that's really thinking a lot about how we're actually contributing to creating a more age-friendly environment by what we do. So I want to come back to our transport example. And you can see that our indicator is aimed at measuring and evaluating our progress at the population level. And so we've developed performance measures that are very specifically targeted at a program that we implemented that was called Try a Taxi program. And so our performance measures are just targeting those participants who took part in that study. And you'll note that one of the indicators is very similar to, one of the measures is very similar to the population level indicator. And that shows how connected these things are. But for the performance, we're only going to collect data from those participants who directly took part in our program. So as with the first two questions, answering the question, is anyone better off? There's a range of data that we might collect to measure that, and participant satisfaction or how people felt about taking part in that program is always an important one. And that brings us to the final overall evaluation of our Age-Friendly Communities Guide. So this is where you bring all of that work together around population accountability and your performance accountability. So this is your process of doing your work, as well as how the outcomes of your work and your impact of the work. And working with your steering committee, you can bring all of that information together. So there are numerous examples in the Global Network database of evaluation reports. So you can really look at a broad section of how communities around the globe report on their work. So communicating both the process and the outcomes is really, really important. If you've got measurable data, then you can visually display that data in really interesting ways. And that enables you to link the big picture of your vision to the smaller steps that you're taking towards that vision. And if you didn't set indicators at the beginning of your work, you can still consider this now as part of that story. Evaluation reports often read as if the 4-step cycle has happened in this beautiful, systematic way. And of course, we know real life is much messier, but it is possible to still look at indicators towards the end. We also need to tell the story. And while I've focused this presentation on measurable data, what we've learned across this echo is how essential it is to hear the voices of older people in all of the ways that they're contributing to an age-friendly environment and all of the benefits they're getting from our work. So again, going back to those baseline data collection processes that Samuel presented, it's an opportunity to go back to those people and see what progress has been made. And you can also answer the same performance accountability questions by drawing on your reflections of your own work and the knowledge and the experiences of your participants, so you evaluate the work fully. So for an example, you can present data in words as well as graphs. So you can capture what you did, how well you did it, and what's changed as a result of your work. So in this example, those 3 performance evaluation questions are answered in about 100 words. And importantly, we're hearing directly from the voice of the people who took part. So that returns us to the start of the cycle again, and we get to come back with greater knowledge and greater evidence for the next planning phase. But I do want to leave you with just 2 thoughts about measuring our progress and monitoring and evaluating our outcomes. And the first comes from the Nobel Prize winning economists, who remind us very clearly that what we decide to measure absolutely shapes what we do. So we need to be very deliberate in that choice about what we're measuring. And the second is that we simply don't have the tools or resources to measure everything, and particularly the things that matter most. And so even if you can't measure it, we always need to be working on what matters most to our communities to create great places to grow old in. So focus on that and tell that story. Thank you.